My name is Kate. I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator here at Home Resource. Before we begin, I want to let you all know that this presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as a part of a media assistant grant donated to Home Resource. So we're going to spend the next hour or so getting to know our zero waste education program that we have here at Home Resource for all fifth graders in the Missoula area. And some surrounding communities. So this program, it kind of has a couple of components. I start off by going to individual classrooms and doing a bit of a classroom visit, a presentation for about an hour. After that, students will do a visioning activity. If you see all of the papers and things at the tables that you're sitting at, those are some cool examples of that. Then they'll spend 2 hours here at Home Resource on a field trip. So I'm going to kind of organize this talk today in that order here. So ZWAP itself is a standards-aligned program for fifth grade students. And here, this program, we talk about zero waste, what it means to be an ambassador, and really here to inspire and uplift individual action within these fifth graders. Along with that, we spend a lot of time learning about different systems on how we make, move, and dispose of all of our stuff. And we also partner with the city of Missoula to uphold I think it's Path C for the 0 by 50 plan for Missoula. Sweet. So we can get into it here. So first, I've got a map here of Missoula. These are all of the schools that we visited in the 2024-2025 school year here. This is our 10th year doing ZWAP. If you notice here, Bonner and Lolo, they're in blue. This was either their first time doing this program or their first time in a while. So we added about 90 students to our ZWAP community by doing that, which is pretty fabulous. Awesome. So to get into it first with this classroom visit, right? This is kind of me standing in front of a classroom talking to all these kids about some kind of complex systems. So I'm going to do the exact same for all of you here. So we start off this presentation talking about, okay, what does it mean, zero waste? What is that? If you are kind of familiar with zero waste, you may have seen this funnel right here. This is just to kind of get kids thinking about these ideas of like, oh, I've seen reduce, I've seen the word recycle. What do those things kind of mean? And then we talk about, okay, zero waste is basically knowing where all of your stuff comes from and then where it goes when you're done with it and how all of that affects where you live and the planet that you live on. So we kind of go through 3 systems here. Our first system is the materials economy. So this is where first we have all of our extracting of resources, then our production, where we sell, consume, and then dispose of all of our stuff. The way that we talk about this with fifth graders is really how everything that we have around us in this room, in their classroom, really comes from Earth as a natural resource. This is oil, trees, minerals, things like that, right? We all get that from Earth, and in order to make all of this stuff that's around us, we have to extract it in some way, right? Maybe that's mining, maybe that's harvesting trees, things like that. Then things get sent to a factory. Usually it's factories, not just one. And that's where all of those things get made into the products that we recognize around us. Then things are sent to the store where we buy them. At school, at home, those are places where we actually use these products. And then when we're done with them, we send them to the landfill. So that's kind of this first system that we want these fifth graders to understand. Some parts about it too, right? Everything starts over there on Earth, right, as a natural resource. And once things get buried in the landfill, they have an end, right? It kind of looks like a line. It has a start and it has an end. So with this system, right, that doesn't sound super sustainable, right? Sustainable meaning that things can go on for, at the rate it's at for basically forever, right? That isn't super sustainable. So then we spend some time talking about, okay, why is that not sustainable? We talk about the consequences of these. And with fifth graders, we talk about a lot of different things. We talk about greenhouse gases. A lot of the time, who was here last July, kind of in the Missoula area? Raise your hand. Yeah, do y'all remember that big July, like, windstorm that happened. Yeah, that's a really good example that kids really relate to, talking about how some climate impacts due to greenhouse gases. We also talk about more wildfires, more drought for ranchers and farmers, things like that. And then we also talk about, what if the trash doesn't end up in the landfill where we want it to be? Have you seen like trash on the playground, trash in like the river where you've seen it, right? That's kind of gross, right? There's a lot of different consequences of that first system, that materials economy. So then we kind of compare it to some of the natural systems that we're familiar with too. One of the standards for fifth graders is to be able to really understand the water cycle. So a lot of the time in the classroom, we compare this materials economy to the water cycle, right? Where water can flow in and out of different states, right? But that water's still there, it's still moving, right? Super sustainable, right? How could we perhaps make that materials economy look a little bit more like that water cycle, where all of our resources, instead of ending in that landfill, cycling through again and again and again? Which brings us to the final system, the circular economy. How many of you have ever seen this as like a graph up here? It's pretty understandable, but it's a concept that people are kind of, cool, okay, cool, right? So with the circular economy, we still have that first system, that materials economy, right? As people, we can't just do away with all of that, right? Toss that out the window, right? But we have some adaptations here to make that look a little bit more like those natural systems, like the water cycle, right? So right up here, right, everything starts off here, we're moving through our system, and then right here, right at school and at home, usually most fifth graders don't own a factory. Most fifth graders don't necessarily own a store, right? At home, at school, that's where these students are able to make some changes and make some choices there. So right here, we could totally send stuff to the landfill right there. We could also, with these arrows, kind of make that look more like a circle, like that water cycle that we talked about. With a bunch of different choices that we have. You might recognize some of these words from that funnel at the beginning of the presentation too, as well. So we'll go through, kind of explain all of these different things. First thing that you can do, right, reduce, just using less stuff, right? You actually choose to reduce right here, but we've got that number 1 right over there, because when you reduce, you're just keeping more resources on that planet for longer. Second thing that you can do, right, with these 2 arrows right here. Hi, welcome. Right, you can reuse, using something again. You could do this at school, at home. Maybe that's getting a hand-me-down from a family member. Reusing kind of at this store level, kind of at the community. That's exactly what Home Resource is doing, right? Doing that at the community level. And then we've got our 3rd arrow, that kind of biggest arrow, and I have rot and recycle right there. Rot's a fancy word for composting, right? We're making something new again, where we have to send it back to the factory, but, right, still better than grabbing some stuff, some natural resources from the earth there. And then lastly here, right under our landfill, in my presentation, I have a photo of a huge pile of trash from the landfill back in November, and right in the front there is a bag, a red bag for Kit Kats. And it's an eyesore in this presentation. Every single kid sees it. And so I bring it up again here, right? With that Kit Kat bag, there's not a lot of things that you can do with that. So some things are designed for the dump, and we have to send them here, but that's not the end of the story here. If we do have to send something to the dump, we can always request to change it for the future. And what that can look like is going all the way to the top, asking the CEO of Kit Kat to make their wrappers more sustainable, and what might make a bit more sense is talking to the people around you about the choices that they're making and the actions that they can take as well, right? And kind of understanding this whole system here is, a lot of people are super familiar with this whole idea of reducing, recycling, reusing, right? You can think of examples of how to do that in your life, but this is a really cool way to kind of visualize how all of these impact the community around us and help those 5th graders understand that this is in fact a system, a group of parts that are all working together. So that's kind of the main points of that first section of that classroom visit that we talk about. Next up, usually all the fifth graders kind of look like you all right now, a little like, oh gosh, Kate. So I give them a bit of a wiggle break, and then we start talking about what it means to be an ambassador. So an ambassador is basically someone who leads by example and encourages others to do the same. So within this program, us at Home Resource, we're asking these students to be ambassadors for these zero waste ideas and helping others around them learn as well, which is pretty cool. We'll spend some time talking about examples, actions that they can do along with this. And the main goal of learning about what it means to be an ambassador is that nobody's perfect. Nobody can do all of these things all the time. But it's super important to try to do your best, whatever that looks like for you all, right? Everyone has different backgrounds, different experiences, different lived experiences. So maybe not everyone can compost, right? They don't have a bucket that gets picked up, things like that, right? You can try your best in whatever that looks like for you. One of the key takeaways here. Awesome. So along with this classroom program, these are some words from some teachers from this past year. I want to highlight this quote on the left here in orange. This is from a teacher from Alberton School. And she uses the Zero Waste Ambassadors program as a way to kick off an entire year of zero waste education. These students will participate fully in the ZWAP program. Then they kind of mix in this whole zero waste idea in a lot of their physical science classes as well. And then they'll make the trip back to Missoula a couple of times so they can head over to Free Cycles and build their own bike for their community every year, which is pretty sweet. Along with that, so that's kind of that first classroom visit. It's kind of an introduction into these ideas, and then the next couple parts of the program are a little bit more interactive. Once I leave the classroom, there's usually about a week or two before students will come to Home Resource to visit us for their field trip. So in between that time, I don't want them just to forget about all of these things. So within that, I ask them to answer this question up here. What does a zero waste world look like to you? I've got a couple activities that they'll pick from, and then they'll bring that activity to Home Resource on their field trip, and we'll spend the first 15 minutes of our field trip kind of chatting about those. So I've got a lot of examples on your tables here. Our first activity here is to create a self-portrait of yourself as a zero waste ambassador, right? Reflecting on what you're doing already in your life. I think there's one right over here. This one is of some students who at Frenchtown are they don't have a zero waste station at their lunch like a lot of MCPS schools do, but they compost at their lunch and they bring it to their school garden. So all of the fifth graders, it's their job at the beginning of the year to teach every other classroom about composting and why it's important. So some of them do some self-portraits there. Others write a letter to a company requesting to change their products. There's one of those on the tables here that is sent to Culligan. I think, Chris, you have it right now. This one is really cool. This was from a student in Paxson. She noticed that a lot of their water at Paxson School, they can't drink it because it has lead in it. And so they get Culligan water tanks shipped in to their school. And she was like, these big plastic jugs, we go through tons of them a day. I want to write a letter to Culligan to try and change the packaging of the water that's brought in, which is really cool, seeing that a fifth grader can see that and try to make some action and change. Next activity up here is redesigning a design for the dump item, right? Kind of think about some engineering, think about how we could make the things that we have now a little bit more sustainable. I think the biggest one that a lot of kids are really into is right here. It's been in my backpack for a while, so the tape is kind of not super great, but the compostable ketchup bottle, things like that. Another one that I thought was pretty impressive was, this is the inside of a binder. It's also a windproof coat hanger, right? So you hang your coat, you hang your keys, whatever, and then, oh, you feel a breeze, clamp it shut, it's not going anywhere. And if maybe some students aren't super into that like creating aspect, another thing that they can do is tracking their waste for the day. Have any of you ever done that before? Ooh, nice. The one that I have on the tables is right there. This is a really cool way just to be aware of what you're doing. I have a stat in my presentation that Montanans throw away about 8 pounds of things per day. So this is a cool way to see, oh, do I throw away 8 pounds of things a day? Usually, usually they don't. But it's a cool way to kind of see, like, okay, what am I throwing away? This student also noted when she composted things, right? And it's a cool way just to see kind of where you're at. Was this surprising? Was it not? Things like that. And then lastly, some kids like to do all their own things, so I always let them create their own thing too. I have some things here. I have a poster right there that some folks wanted to hang up. I've got a comic here of the zero waste guys. It's a pretty compelling story if you want to take a look at it later on. I've also had students whose families were doing renovations and things at their homes, and a student built their own birdhouse out of some old scrap wood, things like that. So this is a cool way really just to maybe reflect on what you're doing already now that you know a little bit more about the systems and zero waste, all that kind of stuff too. Okay, so now that students will come in, we'll talk about these visioning activities, they'll share them with each other. I'll maybe set out some from past classes like this as well. Then after that, we'll come in to our field trip and we'll spend some time. Hi, come on in. Yeah, absolutely. On this field trip, it's kind of split into a couple different chunks here. The first thing we do is review that circular economy idea, and we do it through a game. So each group gets a game board here. Try to reflect on this process and see if they can understand the system without having someone just telling them about it. So each group gets a blank game board like this and a bunch of different pieces, and we go round by round trying to figure out, okay, how do we build this circular economy from just that materials economy? I was thinking about having all of you do this too, but I thought better of it and I just did it. So you all can take a look at this too. So round one, I have folks try to recreate that system that makes and moves all of our stuff here. Round two, once they've got this done, it's trying to think about, okay, where do I choose where all of my stuff goes? And once I choose that, where does it actually go, right? So usually all of our arrows kind of start right here. At home, at school, that's the place where we can choose where our stuff goes, right? We can toss it in the trash, right? It goes right to the landfill, right? We could also choose to maybe reuse it. If we reuse it at home or at school, it goes right back to where we are. That looks like a hand-me-down. That looks like I have this pasta jar. It's gonna be my new water cup, things like that. Again, if you want to reuse, maybe at that community level, like home resource, things like that, we have this arrow following back to the store, right, at that level of our materials economy. And then lastly, if you choose to maybe recycle, things like that, it'll be sent, pretty big arrow, all the way back to the factory, right? And these arrows, their sizes have meaning too, right? Recycling, that takes energy, it takes time, it goes all the way back to the factory, which has some of those consequences, right, that we talked about in that presentation, right? Still better than taking from here. Then students will name all of their choices that they have: reusing, landfilling, recycling, reducing, give a definition so they know what those words mean too. And then lastly, we'll rank them based on some of those consequences that we talked about. Okay, reducing, that's a really cool thing to do. It's number one. Why is it number one? Why is reusing number two? Why is recycling number three? This is a really cool opportunity that is kind of a hard thing to do when you just learn this system at first, to try and think through it and try to understand kind of the meaning of it all, which is pretty cool. Then once students have figured out this whole system, usually I have a group present it. They love that. And then we talk through some examples. Okay, you can recycle, you can reuse. What does that look like in your life? Then we'll kind of end here on this reuse at the donation store level. And that's where we actually head out and we get to see the process of home resource, from donating to having things laid out in the store. So that's That's a really cool option. A lot of students have been here, maybe they've been here with their parents for camps, things like that. It's a cool way just to incorporate all students so they can see the process of community reuse here. Then once students are back in this room, they get to do their own shopping for a building project in here, so they can kind of pretend to be that consumer. So each small group is going to get a building project. I've got a tree house right here. Some of them are a chicken coop. There's a bathroom one. They really love that, I promise. But give them a certain amount of time and students will be able to head out into the store with a measuring tape and be able to try and check off all of these items here. Once students are back, we do a little bit of a reflection after that. A lot of the time students can find all of these things in the store, which is really impressive, especially with Home Resource relying totally on donations to do all of these building projects. I also ask, were there times where you had to be a little creative? So sometimes students were like, oh, I didn't really find a lot of screws, so I had to use some nails too. Or maybe there wasn't this one type of flooring, so my floor is gonna look a little wild. It has a bunch of different types of flooring on it, right? Which is a cool thing to reflect on. And then lastly, if you see right up here, I've got a number right at the top of these shopping lists here. This is a number that is about an estimate of how many pounds of material it would take to do these projects. We do some math on the whiteboard there and we add up, okay, now that we found all of the material for this building project, how many pounds is that? Usually it's around 3,000, 4,000 pounds. And with that number, we can think about okay, looking over at those hills right there, because folks donated these materials and we bought them for these building projects, we're keeping those resources within this system instead of having them over on those hills being buried in that landfill, never to be used again, which is kind of a cool way to bring everything kind of together that way. After that, we usually have a couple minutes left and we'll spend some time, okay, we did this classroom visit, we did this activity, we did this field trip. What's next? What can you do as a zero waste ambassador if you're down to keep doing this? Get ready. I'm gonna ask you all that same question in a bit. Once students give me their answers, we usually pack up and we'll head out. And some teachers aren't as interested in this zero waste thing as that example that I showed before. So we also want to provide a supplemental activity to make these actions something that teachers can do easily in the classroom if they don't have time to maybe integrate that into their curriculum. So we'll also send out a ZWAP bingo. There's a bunch of different actions here for students. They can do this as a class, they can do this individually, just to try and keep up this momentum and their inspiration for all of these different types of action there. So that is the program in a nutshell. My question to all of you is, at the end of our time in the field trip, I give each small group, I ask them to think of 2 actions. What can you do as a zero waste ambassador when you leave here today? I'm gonna ask you all the same thing. I give each kind of table group a time frame. It can be a day, a week, a month, a year, something like that. So I'm gonna give you all 1 minute and 32 seconds. And I'm gonna give each table here a time frame as well. And I want you to think of 2 actions that you in your life could do, or maybe something that you're wanting to do. Sound good? Fabulous. You all look just as excited as the 5th graders. Okay, I want y'all to talk about something you can do this week. Okay, if y'all want to talk together, I want y'all to think about 2 things that you could do this summer. Okay? Okay, get ready. You all have until the end of the year. What are 2 things that you could do if you were a zero waste ambassador at the end of the year? Okay, y'all. So that was definitely more than 1 minute and 32 seconds. And I'm sure maybe our conversation strayed this way and that, but I'd love to hear about some of the things that you all chatted about, even if it doesn't fit into your time frame I gave you. Is there anyone that wants to share?
talked about a few things.
Great.
You know, and we talked about like education being so important. So with the kids, like starting young and having them learn all of this is so important because people like are super lazy. And continuing education because people know all this, but they don't necessarily do it. You feel like you look at the trash can and it's got, things in there that could be recycled.
Yeah, that reminds me of a conversation I had with some employees at Garden City Harvest, talking about the importance of education and how at this age, this elementary school age, it's really cool to like instill these values. So then in a decade, in 2 decades, right, these are going to be like informed citizens of our community, right, who have been kind of understanding this process from like way here. Now that they're here, which is a good point. Yeah. I heard y'all talking.
My group was talking about just for the summer, kind of tracking your waste and then saying over the summer how much you could lessen it and reduce it. And summertime activities like hiking and grabbing garbage or whatever, looking out for it more.
Yeah.
It was not like a super intense conversation.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I think it's really cool just to like reflect on like what you're doing currently, right? A lot of the time I'm all over the place. So taking the time to be intentional about that, that's a really cool thing to do. Yeah.
So, why don't you talk about clothing when you were a kid and, this, and it's real helpful if you start out early, sort of in your family with certain assumptions, but it's not essential. It doesn't have to happen, but your story was so wonderful about clothing.
Well, when I was a kid, I had a pair of jeans that had holes in the knees, and I'd wear them everywhere. And my mother would say, "Oh, don't wear those to the grocery store. Everybody will think we're poor." I said, "I don't care." And then I'd have a sweatshirt and I'd wear it on 4 sides. First the front, then I'd turn it and wear it on the back. Then I'd turn it inside out and wear the front and then the back.
Oh.
And so it was really dirty. But I used all 4 sides.
So, the creative artist, it's magnificent to be that way and to think about this whole project as genuinely fun and genuinely creative and thinking up things you haven't thought up before, and that advertising doesn't just hand you and say you should want this. I mean, there's so much that the brain can wrap itself around and just have a darn good time. For me, that's increasingly the foundation, particularly with young people. Have a really good time and just go places you haven't gone before. And kids already know that, really. All you have to do is say, go, But there's a lot that stops people, that other people often, because of greed, want to stop people. No. Onward.
And then I gotta say, would you mind showing us your blue jeans that you have with the patches on?
Okay. I do not throw away pairs of blue jeans. I keep them, and I have multiple pairs. And you just walk down the street, and literally, someone will stop you. I mean, it never doesn't happen. Someone, wow, that's interesting. So it's great. And it's also, for me at night, when I'm listening to very scary news, it's like worry beads. I do repair work, and I darn socks, that really welcome and healing repetitive motion. But sometimes it's great just not to use words to try to talk someone into something. Let their curiosity come to you. And so in the back, and sometimes people have to remind me, I think you need to fix that spot right there. I think you missed an open place. No, I'm really great.
How old are the jeans?
Pardon?
How old are your jeans?
Oh, I can't even tell you. I think these are at least 20, 25 years old. Yeah, and I've got multiple pairs of these various colored jeans. And tie-dyeing is really good, you know, when colors fit. You can just have boatloads of fun with old clothes.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so hearing from all of you, right, this is the whole goal of education, right? To inspire these actions, to reflect on our lives, and to think about like what we can do now stepping forward. So I appreciate you all taking some time to think about that, just like the fifth graders do as well. So I'm looking at the time. We have a little bit of time left. Does anyone have any questions? Comments?
You may have said this before I got here, but how is the project funded? Does the school pay for it?
Yeah, the schools do not pay for it. This is completely free for schools to participate in. This is funded through grants, and then we also partner with the city as well.
And donations.
Yeah, and donations. Mm-hmm.
What about during the summer? Like how does is there training? I came in late, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So in the summer, we don't do any specific school programming, but we are a field trip site for a bunch of different organizations around Missoula. This past week, we had a group from MNHC come in, and they actually, I've got an example right over here. We're still kind of doing this zero waste education, even though it's kind of summer a little bit more fun. This group, they were the nature detectives, and they came in and they built insect hotels. They walked over from MNHC, gathered a bunch of natural material, and then we had some fabric scraps, some cardboard, things like that to make into their insect hotel. And actually, this whole box here, it came in about 5 different parts, and these were all made from hollow core door parts. So we're still kind of doing that zero waste idea, but making it a little bit more exciting for some summer camp kids. We also have a summer camp coming in August that we partner with the ZWAP with, and it's a whole zero waste camp. So they spend a week here learning about zero waste and doing a big project, which is pretty fun. Yeah.
And how many schools are you in? How many schools?
Yeah, so this year we served about 900 students. It was 41 classrooms and about 17 schools.
Do you do any sort of a big kind of event to kind of bring everybody together? I was just thinking like with SpawnCon, you know, they do, but is there something where like the students can have some sort of big, I don't know, like not necessarily competition, but even if they save, like you were saying about the sporks, if they save the sporks, it's like they, you know, different schools. I don't know, I just think maybe getting a way to having a community, like, oh, you're doing it at your school. I don't know how much communication there is or involvement between getting them all together.
Yeah, right now there really isn't an event that brings all of these individual classes together. That's a really cool idea, right? And it builds off of that, like individual action can make a collective difference. Yeah, right now a lot of the time I'll bring different visioning activities to different schools to share stories of what past students have said, but that's kind of it for right now.
I think we should figure out a way to get rid of the storage units. There's so many of them.
Different of them.
Storage unit.
Drives me insane. You could have, homeless shelters there or something instead of them.
Thinking about how we use our space.
Clear out your storage shed space.
Yeah, find somebody that can use it. I know the refugee place takes furniture and that kind of stuff. They have a want list.
Yes. Soft landing.
Soft
Yeah,
landing.
right.
Are there any resources too, as far as like kind of the upstream thing for just education of as opposed to buying it new? Kind of what you were saying, you can go to Home Resource or Clothes, like the garment industry is just terrible for waste, and people don't think about that. But I mean, is there information or education available so kids are like excited? If you get the community excitement, like kind of the field trip they were doing here, but I don't know, as far as getting them involved to see things, like it's to go thrift store shopping or to, I don't know, I'm just thinking of ways to get kids excited about not buying something brand new.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, right? A lot of the time there's a lot of peer pressure, especially at this like 5th grade middle school stage of like having the new thing, not buying things used. I think I've noticed with my peers kind of in the last like 5 or 6 years, thrifting has become kind of a cool thing to do. Kaylin back here was in charge of our Zero Waste Action Month, where folks from Home Resource made a thrift store map of Missoula. So it had all of the thrift stores and then what they sold. You could kind of check it off to go visit them, things like that, which is a cool resource that kids can do.
And I think also related to that and a number of the other facets of this conversation is the matter of what is advertising grounded in? It's grounded in the wish for happiness. And happiness, if happiness can only be purchased, that's what advertising, that means advertising has succeeded in its own terms. But if there are other grounds of happiness, which there are, then you want to present that. False happiness, genuine happiness, and that leads to a really beautiful weave of thinking about daily life. Daily life.
I like it. I like it.
I was just thinking about we weave together, and usually people are, you know, the competition between schools, that can also unite people as if they have a common cause, but they want to outdo, I don't know, I was just thinking about wanting the new and the best thing, but if there's a way to kind of create camaraderie through competition, there's something in this program, like I don't know how that would be a measurable action, but I mean just as far as kind of having the outreach and the visibility to get people excited in it, because if there's something in it for them, or you know what I mean, like kind of appeal to the vanity of like that, you know, the fulfilling, the recognition. I don't know, it's been so long since I've been young, I don't know if these kids are going anymore.
Oh, no, I like these ideas. They're kind of inspiring me right now.
Well, maybe you could maybe she could come to one of your workshops and show your jeans.
Yeah, just
No, I mean, you know, there are sewing, they still do have some sewing classes, like at Hellgate Elementary, my grandson took a
do
sewing
they?
class, and I'm thinking, why not, you
how
know,
interesting. Yeah,
bring up old shirt and say, here's what you can do, here's a cool old, you know, Levi's shirt or something, I mean, I'm just saying, brand, you know, I don't know, but teach them how to darn a sock.
Yeah.
We also have fix-it clinics too, if you're interested in being a coach.
Yeah, I mean, I know.
So like people can come and they bring stuff that needs to be mended, and then you, as an expert in sewing, can
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be you, but it could be a project.
Is there also through, because isn't there at the university, is there also a zero waste program at the university? So I remember there was a gal that was, I can't remember what, I can look up her name, but I just wasn't sure if there would be something kind of like, not like big brother or big sister, but as far as having, I know there's different climate programs and stuff on campus, so I didn't know if maybe finding a way for them to interact and have something with younger kids might be a way to kind of get people involved on the educational level that are not, you know, they're a little closer in age, but I know I don't know if there's like a big university, you know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sort of program
I mean,
where they meet up and then like big brother.
Yeah, like some kind of like community partnership. Yeah. I mean, education always like grows and grows as like maybe the home resource group and the university group, right? That's so many more people talking about that like collective group. Yeah. Right on. Okay, I'm looking at the time. We don't have tons of time left, but at the end of the ZWAP program, I always ask the students if they're down to continue being zero waste ambassadors. They can say, yeah, I'm gonna do it by signing my ZWAP wall back here. So just from this conversation we've been having, I think you all in this room are pretty down to keep being zero waste ambassadors. So I'm gonna invite you all, if you'd like, to sign your first name on this wall as well. I'll walk around, hand y'all some markers. Nice. And yeah, feel free, get on up, find a spot you want to sign. And thank you all for coming and engaging in this conversation. I appreciate it.